The United States Supreme Court has recently delivered a landmark judgment declaring that Donald Trump unlawfully collected $166 billion from U.S. importers. This was not a matter open to interpretation or disagreement in any way. It was clearly and definitively unlawful. 6 justices, including 3 appointed by Republican presidents, stated this conclusion plainly and without any uncertainty in their written opinion dated February 20th, 2026. Chief Justice John Roberts, who authored the majority opinion, summarized the ruling in a single concise sentence that is likely to echo across the field of trade law for decades. Those particular words simply cannot bear the extraordinary weight that was placed upon them. Those words, specifically the 2 terms upon which Trump's entire trade strategy ultimately relied, formed the central basis of his approach. The authority he claimed had allowed him to impose tariffs on nearly all imports from countries worldwide through a 1977 emergency statute. That authority has now been entirely removed. It has been fully overturned and declared unconstitutional in the manner it was used during this time. However, this is exactly the part that many media outlets are missing in their reporting, and it explains why the broader story goes far beyond what the headlines alone might suggest. The $166 billion in question did not come from foreign governments or overseas entities. It was not taken from Canada, China, or the European Union, as some may have believed. Instead, it came directly from U.S. businesses, the importers who paid those duties at the border and then passed the full cost on to consumers in everyday purchases. Every car part, every aluminum package, every unit of Canadian lumber that entered the market, all of it ultimately flowed into U.S. Treasury accounts, and all of it, as the court has now ruled, was collected without proper legal authority. More than 2,000 importers have already filed formal cases in the Court of International Trade as a direct consequence. Penn Wharton has estimated the total repayment liability at approximately $175 billion, illustrating the enormous scale involved. On March 5th, the Court of International Trade issued its first directive requiring immediate repayment of those duties. But while Washington is now dealing with complicated questions of liability and responsibility, something far more significant is happening simultaneously in Ottawa. Mark Carney's government is not simply watching these developments from a distance. They are actively using them to their advantage. They are applying America's own legal framework in a deliberate manner, taking the same laws Trump once used and now turning them back toward Washington in a calculated response. U.S. trade lawyers are already describing this as the most advanced countermeasure ever deployed by a close U.S. ally in modern history. In the next few minutes, I will walk you through exactly what the court removed, what steps Trump quickly took to replace that authority, and the detailed 3-part legal strategy Canada is now executing with precision. This approach could ultimately leave the United States facing hundreds of billions in repayments, while also permanently restricting its ability to use tariffs as a strategic tool against its closest trading partner. I will also explain clearly why the tariff conflict did not impact Canada in the way many assumed. Instead, it directly affected American consumers. The court has now confirmed that the entire system was unlawful from start to finish. If you care about where your tax money is going and how these policies affect your daily life, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because this story is still unfolding rapidly. Let's examine closely what actually ended on February 20th, because the coverage so far has been incomplete. Washington appears to be relying on the public not fully understanding the details. The EA duties were not a minor policy hidden in the background. They were the central pillar of Trump's entire trade strategy. These were the most extensive tariffs in modern U.S. history, covering nearly all imports from almost every country in the world. The specific duties targeting Canada, Mexico, and China under a declared national emergency tied to drug trafficking have now been fully terminated. The Liberation Day tariffs, introduced under a declared trade imbalance crisis, have also been completely eliminated. Every trade arrangement Trump negotiated with countries like Japan, the UK, and South Korea, where those nations agreed to investments in exchange for lower tariffs, is now affected. The court's reasoning was direct and decisive. The emergency law allows the president to regulate imports during a genuine crisis, but the power to impose tariffs is part of taxation authority, which the Constitution assigns exclusively to Congress. Roberts cited the major questions doctrine, the same principle used earlier to block Biden's student debt relief program. The idea is simple. If Congress intends to grant such significant economic power, it must do so clearly and explicitly. A vague phrase in a 1977 law does not meet that requirement. As a result, the projected $1.4 trillion in revenue over the next decade has been completely erased by this ruling. But the legal consequences go even further. Once the authority was invalidated, the clock immediately started on repayment claims. Canada quickly understood this and acted without delay. Within hours of the decision, Trump moved to introduce replacement measures. He activated Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, a lesser-known Cold War provision allowing a temporary 15% tariff for up to 150 days to address balance of payments issues. However, this measure has clear limitations. It is capped at 15%, far lower than the previous 25-50% rates, and it expires automatically after 150 days, pointing directly to July 2026. The House had already voted to eliminate Canada-specific tariffs, and 24 state attorneys general filed legal challenges against Section 122 shortly after its use. The administration also turned to Section 301, launching a large-scale investigation into multiple markets over alleged trade imbalances. But Section 301 requires extensive evidence, hearings, and time, making it a slow process rather than an immediate tool. Meanwhile, Section 232 tariffs on steel, aluminum, and vehicles remain in place, but under a separate legal track. The result is a constantly shifting tariff environment, where one authority is removed and another is introduced, followed by new legal challenges. Businesses cannot plan effectively, and costs remain unstable. Canada's legal team is carefully tracking every development, building a stronger case step by step. Now, here is the key move that has caused serious concern in Washington. Canada has developed a three-part strategy using America's own legal system. First is the repayment strategy. Canadian exporters working with U.S. importers paid billions, and duties now ruled unlawful. Ottawa is encouraging companies to review records and file claims for refunds while also providing legal coordination. Each successful claim reduces financial damage and strengthens the legal record. Second is the WTO and COSMA dispute system. Canada had already filed cases on steel and aluminum in March 2025 and on vehicles in April. The Supreme Court ruling has now strengthened these cases significantly. Canada can argue that if the tariffs were illegal under U.S. law, they cannot be justified under international trade law. Third is the reverse Section 301 style argument. Canada is using the same structure of evidence and reasoning to argue that the U.S. tariff system itself constitutes unfair trade practices. In effect, the tool once used by the U.S. is now being applied against it. Canada is building its case step by step. First, the tariffs were imposed without legal authority, confirmed by the Supreme Court. Second, threats like the proposed 100% tariffs against Canada over trade with China violate WTO rules. Third, Section 232 tariffs on Canadian metals lack credibility given Canada's close military alliance with the U.S. Fourth, ending trade talks over political messaging sets a dangerous precedent. Fifth, the broader pattern of pressure, including tariff threats and political rhetoric, undermines the principles of fair trade. This strategy is being described as a coordinated legal campaign across multiple forums, including U.S. courts, WTO panels, and regional agreements. Each ruling adds to the overall case, building toward a conclusion that the U.S. violated its own laws and international commitments. The financial stakes are enormous. Penn Wharton estimates total repayments could reach $175 billion, with Canadian-related claims between $8 and $15 billion. Importantly, refunds go to U.S. importers, not foreign governments. This is where Canada's strategy becomes highly effective. By supporting U.S. companies and reclaiming funds, Canada recovers losses indirectly, builds support within the U.S. business community, and strengthens its legal case simultaneously. Over 2,000 claims have already been filed, with many more pending. Delays in repayment only add further evidence. All of this has real-world consequences. Tariff levels may continue to change depending on legal outcomes. Businesses face uncertainty, supply chains remain unstable, and prices cannot settle. Companies like GM have already projected billions in additional costs, which ultimately translate into higher prices for consumers. Analysts estimate the tariff system added around $700 per year to the average American household. And here lies the central irony. The $166 billion collected through these tariffs did not come from foreign countries. It came from American consumers and businesses. Those costs were paid through higher prices in daily life. While companies may eventually recover their losses, consumers will not. The extra money spent is gone. The Supreme Court has now confirmed that these costs were imposed without legal authority. Looking ahead, there are three possible outcomes. The first involves a gradual legal process over several years, with WTO rulings, court decisions, and treaty panels reinforcing each other. This would limit future use of tariffs and eventually compensate Canada. It is a slower path but offers the most lasting stability.